Yeah, so we can launch into this next
I have
one.
one question regarding the contracts and analyze. What would investors really frighten?
So like what kind of contract? If we're not having any is a big, no, like if you don't have any, that's a big problem. So you would, but like what kind of contracts?
Existing contracts or new contracts?
Yeah, so like if you have no existing contracts with suppliers or no existing contracts with, patents, and that's another thing, so patents, nothing like that, an investor's going to think, well, what do you may not have anything substantial to this, you have a great idea, and yeah, that kind of
So for example, for software, for online software, what would it be?
Yeah.
I don't have really suppliers, I don't have...
Yeah, well, it's like patents, these kind of things, intellectual property on the idea would be very
So
useful.
the idea would be useful to have a patent for investors?
Definitely. Yeah, oh yeah. The intellectual property is quite a big thing, so for something like that, definitely.
Well, in addition, could it be something like an email list of potential customers? Could that be?
Yeah, I definitely add to it for sure.
To building some traction, either on market or on the side of...
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, it all sort of paints the picture, so if it's a business that you really don't think there's any, viable contracts to get for it, then have all the other things, together. I mean, the contracts are important, but having all these other things to the market research without delving too much into the specifics of your idea, having these kinds of things are going to be really useful for an investor to consider.
The contracts could also be contracts with customers?
Yeah, exactly. Client contracts.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah.
How important is it to focus on the patents? Because I spoke to quite a few people who said that one, they're very expensive, two, they're very easy to get wrong by changing something slightly, and three, they're very difficult to enforce unless you go to law and lawyer.
That's true. So in the US, I don't know exactly the system of the patents here, but I think you can get a provisional patent, which is going to be less expensive than a full patent, and it's going to be a system that's, at least it shows that you've got the substance to it. So, yeah. Sorry, what was your question?
No, someone was saying forget about patents.
Yeah.
Somebody can quite easily sidestep and change it slightly, and secondly, unless you've got a very expensive team of lawyers, you're not going to be able to uphold it.
Yeah, I would say provisional patent. I mean, I think it is important, like in the space sports we had, there was this intellectual property on that, and I don't know if it was, particularly, it doesn't have to be so involved, it has to have some kind of protective aspect of your business, because then, if you don't have anything like that, then the investor could just say, this is a good idea, I think I'll just do this, so, and depending on the investor, they might have huge resources that it's just, you get squashed. So to have some kind of protection is really important.
What about an NDA?
Yeah, that's if they violate an NDA, then that's a big problem for them. So definitely sign that with actually, that's a good point. I didn't add that to this, but that's a really good point. NDA means non-disclosure agreements, where you're presenting to an investor, and I do have in the LOI a bit of a confidentiality agreement that I drafted up, but it's really important to make sure that they're not going to go steal the idea, and make sure that they don't disclose any of the information. So NDAs also important. So.
How easy is it to get investors to sign an NDA?
Usually, I mean, if they express an interest in the idea, they're not going to be against signing an NDA because they want to look at what you got. So and you should be very adamant about not showing it to them if you don't have an NDA.
So there's another question. At what stage, if you contact an investor and say, look, I've got a great idea, can you sign an NDA before I talk to you? Will that put them off, or will they? At what stage do you start talking about the NDA?
Yeah, no, I would talk about it fairly immediately, but this is, I'll get into something a little bit later, which is about, you don't necessarily have to reveal specifics. I think it's once the stage which you've reached sort of where you're revealing, things that are very specific about it. Because it's quite general, I don't think you have to get an NDA signed at that point. Okay. All right. Next question. What do you think is the best way to get interested investors, so have investors get interested in your product or company? Yeah, it's a tough one.
A good pitch.
Yeah, a good pitch, which is going to involve some of these things of the So yeah.
A great product.
Yeah, that's true. That's
show him numbers.
Yeah, so all these things from the previous, having the market research, but getting the initial interest. There's two you know, kind of tricks that, I don't know if they're tricks, but tips that I don't know. But this is an old adage, asking for advice gets you money, asking for money gets you advice, and you know, where to go shove things. If you ask an investor for money directly, they're going to probably ignore it at the first step. I mean, so if you just send an email unsolicited to you know, Stelios, for example, or someone, he gets hundreds of these a day, you know, it's just, give me money, give me money, give me money. You know, saying you're walking down the streets and someone's, you know, can I have a euro and stuff, and it's like, okay, maybe to the first person, maybe the second person, but, you know, it's like hundreds of people coming up to you asking you for money all the time, you don't even pay attention to it anymore. And so, try to be different in that respect, in that you're going to be asking them for advice. You're going to say to, you know, Richard Branson, hey, you know, I've got this really great idea for this music business, and you've done so well with this kind of business. I just, you know, if you could give me some advice on this, that would be really fantastic. And that's leading to a dialogue already, you know, that you can have, and you know, and it's going to lead to much greater success than just asking for money. So yeah, so asking for advice gets you money, asking for money gets you advice. And the other thing is the Me Too mentality. So does anyone have an idea what I'm getting at here? It's like, if you get one investor, if you want to raise €1 million, you get one investor to put in for 100,000 euros, then you can tell everyone else, look, this guy really knows what he's doing, he's investing in my business. Everyone else come on board. And this is how a lot of companies get financed. They don't get financed by just one investor, they get financed by a consortium of investors. And especially if you can get someone who's in your field that you're doing to start putting a small investment in, it'll attract investment from other investors as well. And this is, you know, exactly what happened with space sports as we, you know, it was a consortium of investors. So, you know, and yeah, that's the two things that I would recommend as tips. So, okay. All right. So letters of intent, we talked about a little bit briefly. Do you guys know anything else about them? Like, have you ever used one before?
It's not really binding,
Yeah.
actually.
It's not binding, that's true. It's, yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
But it does show interest in your product or service.
Exactly. And that's the real purpose of them, is that you're showing some interest in your business. Yeah. So, it's not a contract. There's no legally binding anything in it. So, for an investor, that's attractive for them because they want to see all these kinds of things. And this is kind of where the NDA starts to come into play. So you're sending them this letter of intent, and they're signing it saying, I am interested, but I got to see all these facts and figures first. That's really like, at that point, you really should have an NDA signed and that kind of thing. Yeah, so it outlines the terms of sort of a potential deal.